Hello and welcome back to the Sherry Sylvester Show. My guest today is Ryan Gravatt, brave enough to return to the podcast. Ryan brought digital campaigning to Texas and is a pioneering strategist on all things virtual. He was involved in the first statewide campaign to abandon yard signs in Texas, as well as one of the first to do campaign messaging through text long before it became a routine thing. Ryan is the CEO of Raconteur Media, which he launched here in Austin in 2004. He's a graduate of the University of Florida, which recently named him one of their top 100 entrepreneurs. Ryan is one of the best thinkers we have on how voters view public policy and the candidates who espouse it. And he's back on the podcast today because he's been digging into the digital evidence as part of a massive research project nationwide that gives us new insight on what voters see in candidates, when they see it, and what's involved in determining who they choose to support. All this has profound impact not only on elections but also on public policy. I've only skimmed through the research, but I can tell you right off, he's got some explaining to do. Ryan, are you trying to tell us that all politics isn't local and that nobody cares what George Clooney thinks? Seriously?
Those are great questions, and that's a great place to begin. As long as I've been working on campaigns, I've always asked, well, why do people vote? We know why people buy chocolate. We know why people buy milk and eggs. But why do people vote? Because if you know why people vote, then you can start to create some motivational sentences and language and images about get out and vote. And so we have a proxy for this in campaigns, message polling. So it doesn't necessarily tell people why they should vote. It tells people why they should vote for a person or the candidate, or why they should vote for the proposition. But the times between elections, there are some people who are thinking about elections and there are some people who are not thinking about elections. But with these voters who are not thinking about elections and thinking about elections, I really wanted to dig into what's the velocity of certain campaign messages with these people who are not thinking about voting. And what's the same velocity with people who think about campaigns more often than their neighbor? So we undertook this survey so that we could get some answers to some of these questions. Why do people vote? And what turns them off? What do they expect from candidates in order to have the candidate earn their vote? What are some trusted information sources? And what are some information sources they don't trust?
Well, you say a couple of things. You say we, so this was a nationwide survey.
Nationwide survey.
Who put it together? And then what do you mean by velocity?
Well, when I say we, I mean my company, my agency, Raconteur Media.
Okay.
We put it together.
Okay, good for you.
I commissioned this. I paid for this. I wanted to have this information so that I could put together a 6 or 9 month primer for my candidates, for people who want to be my candidates, on what do I know about the audiences that they're talking to. Because we come to this with, I know what messages, after we conduct a poll, your audience need to hear. But again, back to the consuming part, how important is it that we get a celebrity endorsement? Well, it turns out it's not very important. And you and I are talking about Texas voters. 74% of our voters, Republican, Democrat, Independent, said a celebrity endorsement is a turnoff. It's a distrusted source of information.
And that's someone in show business as opposed to Governor Abbott?
We just said celebrity endorsement.
Okay.
Yeah. So we didn't ask, does one endorsement from a politician help another up-and-comer? It was a celebrity endorsement.
Okay. So George Clooney, George Strait.
George Strait.
And as we saw, Taylor Swift. Remember the week when we thought Taylor Swift was going to turn the presidential election?
Yep. And I think what celebrities are starting to learn is there's no quicker way to divide your audience in half than to pick one side of the political spectrum.
Right.
Some things that I was not expecting, that I wasn't necessarily looking for, were how, you asked me, what do I mean by velocity? Okay, so information moves in today's campaigns very rapidly. We could test a few poll messages on Monday, and on Friday we could put them out with confidence that these are going to work and mobilize large segments, small segments. We know they're going to mobilize voters. And we could put them out in social media advertising. We could cut a script. We could start running a commercial days after we get the poll. We could send text message. So we could put this out really, really quickly. So once it gets to the voters, I want to know, is it inert? Is it something that they're going to act upon? Is it like, oh, I've been waiting for this kind of message for a campaign for a while? Text messages are pretty disruptive, especially if they're unsolicited. So why do we go through all of the mechanics of getting the message and sending a disruptive text message if it irritates the voter? So that's not something I wanted to participate in if we had a relative choice to, well, why don't we use the message differently, because some voters are going to receive it better than others. So for example, permission marketing, which is a pretty old science, is, hey, Sherry, I think you might like my product. Can I send you some information about it? You say, sure. Well, it turns out voters would like to have that same kind of relationship with a campaign. And I think that kind of relationship can actually give one campaign an advantage over another. So we go through all of the mechanics of, let's test the message, let's get the message out, let's blast it to them as quickly as possible. Well, we've probably just irritated a large number of voters because they weren't asking for it or looking for the information at the time that we sent it. But it was really important to the campaign that we get it out. So by velocity, I mean, once we get it to them, how do we deliver it, and is it part of their decision-making science? So,
can I interrupt you again?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you decided that you wanted to find out how these people think and what makes them act,
mm-hmm.
who's in the pool? Is it anybody that potentially is eligible to vote, or we know a lot about who actually votes and who doesn't?
Right.
So who did you talk to?
We talked to voters of all stripes: Republicans, Democrats, Independents, 18 to 65 plus. And we wanted it to be proportional to the people who turn out to elections. So we have a lot more 65 plus than we have 18-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm talking about them, those are the voters. You and I are talking about the results from the Texas cohort
mm-hmm.
Of our survey. So that's who the them is I'm speaking of. We gave these voters, I think, between 30 and 35 statements where they could say strongly agree, strongly disagree. And from that, they grouped themselves, or they ended up being grouped into 4 segments or cohorts: civic-minded, connected, locally focused, and disillusioned.
Okay, so let's break those down. What is civic-minded?
Civic-minded, they're characterized by, they think about elections 6 months ahead of time, and they make their choice of who they're going to vote for 3 months ahead of the election. They vote.
Is that just a partisan split? I'm just going to keep interrupting.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because, I know who I'm going to vote for in 2028.
Right, exactly.
Whoever the Republicans put up. So I've got it down to 3 or 4 people.
Right. So in Texas, the civic-minded and the connected, who we'll talk about in a minute, make up the majority of the Republican voters. They share those characteristics. In Texas, the disillusioned and the locally focused are the majority of the Democratic Party voters. So we'll talk about who the characteristics of those segments in a minute. The civic-minded voters they're just ready to vote. When's the next election? How can I improve my country?
In San Antonio, we say they drive around on Tuesday looking for the polls.
That's right. Those are your civic-minded voters. They also have the highest expectations of the candidates. You better do what you told me you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go seeking this office and thinking that I'm not going to be watching you. No, they'll be watching. The connected voters have their own opinions about why they should vote. But they're definitely in the camp of people that want to vote. They're looking for the I'm going to vote because we need certain things to happen. And that's more important to them than feeling their civic duty is to vote. So, for example, I'm going to vote because we need to lower taxes. I'm going to vote because we have fill in the blank issue to resolve. They prioritize solutions from from the people they give their proxy to, who they vote for. They also are a lot more interested in diving into sources of information for affirmation or for research on for whom they should vote. This group also proactively takes information and shares it. So think of it as
the connected group.
Yes, the connected group. Think of this as your politically interested friend that discovers a new fact or discovers a new Wall Street Journal article and says, this is relevant to our city, our country, our state, and this is a good reason to vote for so-and-so. The civic-minded people, not so much. Both of those folks have a strong distrust of the news media. And actually, all four cohorts do, because most voters did not have a favorable view of news media. Local news, national news, even partisan news. And I need to dig into this a little further, but I think what we're finding is partisan news outlets are entertainment and affirmation, as opposed to a place to go learn something new about for whom you should vote. National news also probably plays a pretty heavy hand in how these different voting groups think about national elections. These different voting groups are deciding 6 months before a national election who they're going to vote for. These groups are thinking 3 to 6 months before a U.S. Senate, a statewide, who they're going to vote for. And I think this gives a real opportunity or an advantage to incumbents. These groups are also thinking 2 to 3 months before a state and local election who they're going to vote for. So again, I think this gives an advantage to incumbents. Now,
just because
2 or 3 months ahead of time, the incumbent's name ID is already known. The incumbent's been in office for 2 years. These incumbents should have these people as constituencies. Their incumbents are doing things. These voters, these civic-minded and connected voters, highly value experience and promises made, promises kept.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not an incumbent, you don't really have that as part of your record.
But it seems like there's also this narrative, and maybe it's not there. There's the even in Texas, even where conservatives and Republicans have been in charge forever, that we want to throw those people out because nobody's doing enough, and people are, as soon as the last election ends, people are out there, the challengers usually.
Yeah,
statewide.
Right. I didn't find an appetite for throw the bums out.
Okay.
What I found was an appetite for electing the right people, voters doing their due diligence on researching who they're voting for, and a cohort of these voters for like the civic-minded and the connected for doing research. There are about 20% of Republicans who are disillusioned voters. So you could say those are the throw the bums out, but their disillusionment was not around incumbents never do anything good. Their disillusionment was around, I can't find the information that I want about the issues that matter most to me. So they might be in different categories about the information that they care about. They, like the rest of the voters, don't trust traditional media for giving them the full story. So they go and do their own research in social media for finding their, how will they find their candidate. But they're also probably disillusioned because they're not paying attention to all the news cycles and all the information that candidates are putting out until towards the end, towards the deadline, towards like when do you have to go make your decision and go vote.
So it's part of their disillusionment, because when you were talking about civic-minded and connected, and connected is kind of a telling word, because I'm thinking, so is this another way of seeing polarization?
The connected voters are voters who engage with campaigns and who donate, and they're the ones that are also sharing information. I think the polarization is more around the fringes of the loudest and the people who have a more arbitrary view of elections and maybe what one candidate promised and what they're delivering, and they may not have an appetite for the length of the process to get certain policies across the finish line. I didn't find a ton of disillusionment. I didn't find a ton of polarization, because through the 30 or 35 statements of strongly disagree and strongly agree, we were trying to find why do you vote, and why you vote is, or why these people were showing us they vote, even the disillusioned ones, because they think that the vote is the best way to make their voice heard. So I guess in the partisanship way and the polarization way, those folks still feel like voting makes their voice heard, but we also found a very big appetite, particularly among Republicans who are civic-minded and connected, that the incumbents should get things done, even working across the aisle, so that they have promises made and promises kept.
So I wanted to ask you about this term. You start off in your report saying that Texas voters are looking for authenticity. So what does authenticity look like to voters?
Yeah. So what voters told us was that they would like to hear directly from candidates, and they would like to see candidates putting their promises into action. So when we looked at what's a trusted source of information that conveys authenticity, televised debates was the top choice, which doesn't get much more authentic than that. When you're on a stage and you're stripped bare and you're thinking on your feet, that shows you the real person. Whether they are polished at debate or they're a first-time candidate, you're really going to get the real candidate right there. You and I know that by working for candidates. They would like to see candidates, warts and all, through social media, through video. And I think that we are looking at a turn of how people who vote are consuming information from candidates on how they want to receive their message. I don't have to think. The data shows us they do not want long pieces of information so that they can scroll through and discern and say, okay, this person agrees with me and this person doesn't. They want consumable video that is interesting to watch and is directly from the candidate. I'm going to dig into this a little bit more and find out what the differences in types of videos are. But you and I know that there's the TV commercial that a lot of people call video, and then there's the 20-second post from a candidate who's just giving an update because they had just spoken to an organization and they wanted to convey the energy of it. When I look at the responses that move people the most toward voting, it sounds to me like the data is saying we want a relationship with a candidate so that they know what's going on in our lives, and they're conveying that their reason for running is to solve a problem, provide a solution, and move our country forward. And I think you can only do that through authentic communication.
Before we move off you talked about the disillusioned, and there may be more to say about that, but what about these locally focused people?
Mm-hmm. So we asked a series of questions, like I said, statements, 30 to 35 statements, but then we also repeated these statements and asked people, when you're thinking about local elections, just like we said, when you're thinking about your statewide elections, just like when you're thinking about your national elections. And these folks placed a greater strongly agree with our statements on local elections. So there's more locally focused Democrats than there are locally focused Republicans. And I think that cuts pretty true to the type of voting and elections you see in Texas. You see the major metropolitan areas have a dominant presence when it comes to your Democratic or progressive candidates, whether it's for city council, for school board. So that's the locally focused voters' priorities. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at that perhaps more than the national elections. And if I had to think about the psychosis of this, like what's behind that, we did this poll in May. It was 6 months after the national election. Democrats didn't have as strong a candidate as they would liked, lost that election. What's next for them to focus on? It's the local elections. So,
well, and also I think in Texas, maybe that's where people feel like they can have some impact, because Democrats do run the cities.
Right.
And of course, that's what we're seeing in New York City. So the thing you found, the information they trusted, was their own eyes, the debates and the videos of candidates speaking, as opposed to any kind of third party.
Right. That's a great summary of that. Third parties are interesting and good for candidates to have. They help candidates have a bigger footprint if these third parties are going to talk about the candidates. But when voters are trying to decide who they're going to vote for, they want to hear directly from candidates.
Well, you talked a little bit about that celebrities, they don't care about celebrities. And I'm wondering, I mean, and kind of going in, I'm not sure if this is fair. So we know that Taylor Swift didn't make a difference. Did Joe Rogan make a difference? You know?
Well, I think
or was it that the communication? Was it the message of the messenger?
Yeah, I think that's certainly different. You know, Joe Rogan and then the other top 10 podcasters who host a forum where people can talk about issues and candidates' names get brought up. I think that's a little bit different than George Clooney or any other celebrity example telling people you need to vote for Joe Biden because I said so, and that's why that's important for you to know.
Yeah.
I don't think using your social media as a celebrity to put that out there is going to affect the race one way or another. You're probably going to get a lot of affirmation, blowback from people in your audience that were already going to vote for them anyway.
Well, tell me about so some of this was just maybe the shorthand that you were using, but you talked about partisan niche news media. Okay, so is that Fox and MSNBC?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the big one. It's not the TPPF canon online.
Correct. No.
Okay.
I'm thinking of partisan niche, the cable news networks that have 95% partisan viewership. Are they moving the needle for voters who are truly looking for information about why to vote and for whom to vote for?
And your answer was for over half no.
54% said no.
So we're just watching it for entertainment.
Entertainment and affirmation.
Okay.
That's the conclusion I draw.
And then, but what about this national news media? Who is that? Is that ABC? Is that?
Yep, ABC, your broadcast stations.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that in. I think that's because you're a journalist, because we tend to think on the conservative side, well, the media doesn't have any impact anymore. But yeah, they do. They still create the narrative, and then we react to the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's what you see on our media. So the party leaders have no impact, campaign staff, social media posts. And local news was better, but still people are not paying attention.
Right. 34% said they would never trust it. So I guess that means 56% do trust it. 66% do trust it. Sorry, I did my math wrong.
Well, on leaders, you talked a lot. You said several times people want people who do what they say they're going to do. Well, all of them do what they say they're going to do. They'll come and tell you, I said I was going to do this, and I did it.
Yeah.
And you're like going, well, there's some details there that you're kind of missing. But I was interested in this half want decisions based on evidence, not ideology.
Yeah, I found that really interesting
And
too.
because that's not what I hear.
Yeah.
We want real conservatives.
Right.
We want those decisions to be made on their conservative principles.
Right. So I could go back and look at a pivot table on this by the cohorts of, the civic-minded, or just Republicans versus Democrats, or the civic-minded and the connected, and how because those leadership style percentages would change based on, how we've organized those folks by their answers. But again, why are people voting, and why are they choosing and sticking with the candidates that they're going to vote for once they've made their decision? They're choosing people who are making 50% of them say they're making their decisions they're making their vote based on supporting candidates who make decisions based on evidence or information and not ideology. So I take that away, back under the way we characterize the communication of being authentic. I take that as a challenge to candidates to say, I voted this way, fill in the blank on the evidence that you saw, as opposed to not explaining in a way and just saying, I voted for it because I'm a liberal Democrat, or I voted for it because I'm a conservative Republican. I don't think that sells. I think what will come across to voters, solidify voters that have already decided to vote for you, or persuade voters who are still on the fence, is to explain what is it that made you vote that way. Vote for a bill. What made you veto a bill if you're a governor, and explain that within the context of your conservative values and beliefs. Again, that's going to come across as more authentic than, well, I'm just conservative, or yeah, I'm just liberal and I just did that.
Talk about one of the things, the data points that you presented are the qualities in a candidate that people are looking for. And you've been talking about some of that, putting citizen needs before party loyalty, for example, or courage to stand up for what is right. A lot of times in the heat of the battle, is my congressman standing up for what is right, or is he blocking legislation?
Well, there's
is that always a good risk? If there's, and we've seen this all the time in Texas. There's 5 guys against this bill, and usually guys, and we can't move it because they're standing up for what they say is right.
Right. There's a lot of subjectivity in that, because we're asking the voters to, in our survey, make a choice and answer a question on standing up for what's right. So if you're the elected official, you have to be very in touch with your district to, believe you understand what is right in their eyes, and then you have to go out and do it. Just looking at some of the statements that you just read, I wonder if the Democrats that have fled Texas to stop the political maps being drawn are going to get as much support in their district as they're getting from the small cadre of donors and other party loyalists who are saying, take these actions because you're standing up for what's right. I just kind of wonder, looking at the answers to these questions, how many of these folks are going to come back to their district and have to explain, this is what I did and this is what's right.
Well, you talked about authenticity, and it seems like that's the bedrock of what you've discovered here. And of course, Donald Trump has redefined authenticity. But how do we see it? We see other candidates trying to be Trump.
Right.
How do you think about authenticity based on candidates you've worked with in your career? And
Trump was very authentic. Love him or not like him, you knew exactly what he was saying because he was communicating it to you, and he wasn't hiding or obfuscating or even being the least bit coy. And that's sort of that maverick style of campaigning. We consider that the outsider. Well, the outsider being very authentic is refreshing to the insider and refreshing to the people that are probably hedging a little bit and protecting because they want to protect their incumbency. So voters are very good gauges of who's being authentic and who's not. So what I would say to a candidate is be your most authentic self, explain exactly what you're going to do, what problems you're going to solve, what solutions you're bringing to the table. Do it direct to camera by video, do it in the least polished way so that the form and the substance looks authentic, because again, reflecting back to Trump's use of social media, very authentic, very direct to camera, sometimes highly produced, but for the energy factor, not for the message factor. And another thing that occurs to me is, we're on the verge of AI taking over so many facets of campaigning and content creation and whatnot. And candidates and campaigners really need to be careful that they're not using it to expedite processes where they're skipping an opportunity for their candidate to deliver a very authentic message. We're 17, 18 years into voters having an iPhone or a smartphone in their pocket where it's a two-way street. They can see candidates clearly, and candidates have a one-to-many opportunity to communicate with voters. And so now that we've gotten used to that, now that that's part of the campaign message distribution, candidates really ought to be as authentic as possible, and then check the reactions of voters to make sure the voters understand that this is their authentic self and this is their authentic message. And there's just the risk that AI could be expediting content distribution but missing opportunities, or candidates could be missing opportunities to communicate authentically to voters.
So it has changed dramatically because of the tools that we have. I mean, one of the things you and I used to do is communicate for candidates. I don't have any idea that somebody is communicating for Trump on social media. Somebody may look at that tweet, but it's him, and we know it's him. Or if it's not him, then they're doing something we really don't know about because it seems authentic.
And there's this is not a new phenomenon, being authentic. I think back to Robert Caro's biographies about Lyndon Baines Johnson, and LBJ rode around the state of Texas in a helicopter and leaned out the window with a bullhorn. And they used news to tell people when and where he was going to be. And then they dropped leaflets. And people just turned out in the hundreds because they knew at 11:30, LBJ in his helicopter were going to fly over, and he was going to lean out, and he was going to have a bullhorn and say something. They clearly couldn't see him because he can't get that close to the ground. But LBJ loved it. The helicopter
could shoot hogs in Texas legally now.
From the helicopter. But you don't see campaigns today adopting, well, maybe I should fly around a state as big as Texas in a helicopter, because they've developed other ways to distribute message in a way that's authentic. So, adopt to the medium and the media of the day to deliver that authentic message, and do it in a way that makes sure it resonates with voters.
Yeah, and the lieutenant governor does that. One of your candidates, he flies into different media markets. And what you notice about those stories is the lieutenant governor was in Midland, and the lieutenant governor was in Corpus Christi, and he said this and that and the other.
And he goes to diners.
And exactly.
He goes to diners and he drinks tea just like everybody else, and gets up from his booth and has conversations and wants to know about people. Very authentic campaigner, very authentic man, very authentic office holder.
Well, are you going to write this up, Ryan? Well, where can people get all this information about who voters are and when they figure it all out?
Go to Raconteur.com. We'll have a form that people can fill out to stay abreast of the missives about the survey. We're going to be holding video calls and doing summaries over the next 6 months as we pull out new findings. And if you're a candidate, reach me through social media, and if you're one of my clients, you'll get scheduled for one of these. But if you're a candidate and you want to talk to me a little more deeply about this, just reach out to me through social media, and we'll get you briefed.
And also people who advocate public policy issues.
Absolutely, they should, because they want to mobilize voters to persuade incumbents and tell candidates, well, these are the issues that are most important to me, and this is why I'm voting.
We feel like we've broken a lot of ground here at Texas Public Policy Foundation in terms of how to move people.
Absolutely.
Move voters. Ryan, thanks for coming back in.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for joining us today. You can subscribe to the Sherry Sylvester Show at Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on X at Sylvester1630, and I'm now on Substack, so look for me there. You can follow me there too. If you'd like to receive my 9th in Congress newsletter, including my weekly winners and losers list, which can't be missed, you can sign up at the TPPF website, www.texaspolicy.com/9th in Congress. See you next time.